She said it was networking. Then I found the hotel key card. The sky over the river was the color of an overripe plum when the lights came up on the Armitage Hotel's rooftop. My wife, Lee, had picked the place for her firm's donor gala. Glass railings, ferns with leaves like polished lacquer, a bar that looked like an ice sculpture bleeding champagne. She wore a dress that seemed poured on, the kind of red you feel in your throat. People talked about investment tax credits and smiled with their whole faces, while their eyes kept slipping away to check who might be watching them watch. It was that kind of night, and I was the kind of husband who held a clutch while my wife hugged the city out of people. I'd learned this role: quiet, steady, amusing in a way that didn't invite follow-up questions. In the early years, Lee used to squeeze my forearm when someone tried to corner me with a monologue about software architecture, and I'd squeeze back because the rescue felt like conspiracy, like we were stealing time together right there under the chandelier. Lately, she squeezed my arm because she'd forgotten where she left her glass, because she needed a picture with the board chair, because I was a table to put the evening on. When I opened her clutch to fetch a lipstick, the keycard was there, stamped with the Armitage insignia and a room number written in a hurried scrawl, 1103. I stared at it as if it might clarify itself into something innocent. Maybe Lee had booked a room for a sick donor to rest in or to store the silent auction items. Maybe. I slipped it back in, ignoring the small tremor in my fingers. Lee was laughing at something the events director said, head thrown back, throat like a pale comma. If I'd looked up at that exact second, if I'd met her eyes with the card still warm in my palm, none of what happened later would have unspooled. But the band shifted into a velvet-limbed cover of I Put a Spell on You, and a gust of river air came up smelling like mint and rain, and the kind of night it was kept rolling over us. Around 9, while Lee worked a cluster of men in loosened bow ties and one woman in a glittering pantsuit, my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar. The text was not. Room 1103, 10 minutes, just you. The words clicked into me the way wine slides down a polished glass. They were both invitation and verdict, a string pulled on something I'd been pretending wasn't there. I looked up and caught Lee's profile, her lipstick barely smudged, the small notch on her ear where she'd clipped an earring too fast once. Her eyes were intent on the older man in the center of the group, the development chair who wore money like an extra skin. I typed, "Who is this?" The reply came before I'd put the phone halfway in my pocket. You know. 10 minutes is an inconvenient length of time. It's too long to pretend you forgot, too short to excuse yourself with grace. I went to the bar and asked for water and felt the bartender clock my wedding band, felt the city itself shrug. In the elevator, I looked up at the little hovering number and down at my shoes as if one of them would decide for me. The hallway on 11 smelled faintly of lemon and something expensive and anonymous. Room 1103's door was closed, and the small green light on the lock glowed like a wink. My hand hesitated, not because it wanted to be stopped, but because it wanted to be wanted. The keycard slid, the lock clicked, and the quiet inside made noise seem like something you had to earn. The suite was the kind that tries to look like a home while announcing at every corner it is not. A low couch, a bowl of fruit that reflected itself in the table, a bedroom door cracked slightly open. A floor lamp threw gold over the carpet, and I saw my reflection in the window. A man standing on the edge of a choice, or maybe swept past it, not brave so much as already committed by curiosity and hunger. "Close the door," a voice said from the bedroom, soft and shaped by a smile. Not Lee's voice, I registered, and then the recognition hit. Tessa, Lee's closest friend from grad school, the one who'd once smoked on our balcony at 2 in the morning, murmuring opinions about poetry and marriages with the authority of a woman who avoided both. Tessa with the wide, amused eyes. Tessa who had a talent for arriving just when Lee needed to feel like the most interesting woman in the room. I closed the door. She was standing by the bed in a black slip that wasn't trying very hard to be called a dress. Tessa's hair fell over one shoulder as if it had decided to be intimate with her clavicle. There was a glass of champagne on the nightstand and Lee's perfume in the air, a threading sweetness that felt like memory pressing its hand over my mouth. A small carry-on sat open on the chair with clothes folded into truce. "Hi, Nathan," she said. "You look like you just solved a crime." "I didn't expect," I faltered. I didn't have a sentence that wasn't either an accusation or a plea. "You expected Lee," Tessa said, watching my face the way a violin listens for a pluck. "I thought you might. She asked me to watch her phone while she made the rounds. I saw your name light up and then, well, curiosity is an addiction I never cured." "Did you text me?" My voice didn't sound like mine, which was fine because I didn't like mine very much in that moment. Tessa tilted her head. "Yes and no, I sent the words, but they were already there." She guided me toward the window with 2 fingers brushing my sleeve, a touch so light it left a heat behind like lips do after you pull away. The city lay below in jeweled freckles, the river a ribbon of moving obsidian. We stood there with the whole hotel humming underfoot, and something inside the hum found the frequency of my pulse. "I'm not playing games," I said, and believed it the way you believe the floor is steady. "Good," she said, "neither am I." The bedroom door was ajar enough to suggest secrets without giving them away. Tessa was close enough that the scent of her lotion, coconut and something grown in the dark, seemed to thread through my chest and out my back. I thought of Lee spinning laughter around donors, of the card in her clutch, of the number written in ink that had bled a little into the glossy paper. I thought about fidelity, how it looks sturdy on paper and slippery in a room with 2 people and 1 choice. Tessa touched my wrist. "You know she's not alone tonight," she said, not cruelly. "I'm not here to ruin you. I'm here because you deserve to know when the ground under you has been quietly replaced." "Who?" The word was more breath than sound. She nodded toward the adjoining door, the kind hotels have for connecting suites when families travel together and pretend that makes distance smaller. The lock tab had been turned, but the door itself hung in a way you could pretend it didn't. Through the narrow gap, the corner of another bed was visible, and a suit jacket lay across it like an idea discarded in a hurry. A man's baritone floated once, then the low answer of Lee's voice. The sound was ordinary and devastating, like hearing your name from a stranger's mouth. I had imagined evidence in screenshots, in a lipstick stain on a collar, in a calendar marked too often with late meetings. I had not imagined this, the physical architecture of betrayal, 2 rooms leaning back to back, my wife 6 feet away, and on the other side of a lock I could turn. "Why?" I asked, although I knew the grammar of that question doesn't have an answer. Tessa set her glass down. "Because sometimes people want to be wanted by someone who doesn't need a past with them to see them. Because power is an aphrodisiac in this city and Lee wants to feel powerful and chosen. Because she's been 2 steps ahead in her career and 2 steps behind in your marriage and she didn't know how to subtract, only how to add." She met my eyes. "And because she thinks you'll forgive her the way you forgive messes after lavish parties, shake out the cloth, spritz some seltzer, laugh about the stain and move the vase." The cruel part was how reasonable the explanation sounded in Tessa's mouth. I felt a flare of anger because it fit, and then I felt ashamed because it fit. The music from the gala drifted up through the window like the ghost of an alibi, and for a moment I imagined walking back to the roof and clinking glasses with a man who had his hands on my wife's hips 2 floors below me. "What do you want from me?" I said, and the rawness in the question startled Tessa into a small, honest pause. "I want you to stop giving her the benefit of a doubt she didn't leave you," she said. "I want you to see her as a woman who made a choice, not a clever accident that happened to her." She closed the distance until we were 2 breaths apart, and "I want a moment with you that isn't borrowed from anybody else." She said it without coyness, and maybe that's why it slipped under my ribs. The city does this too, offers you a corner where no one knows you and says, "Go ahead, try out the version of yourself who doesn't ask permission." I set my hands on Tessa's shoulders, feeling the fine tension of her muscles, the lightness before a decision. She reached up, ghosted her fingertips along my jaw, and I made a sound I didn't recognize and didn't try to catch. Kissing her was like stepping off a curb you didn't see. Sudden, inevitable, a tiny jolt that rearranged your organs while the world pretended not to notice. She tasted like citrus and risk. The kiss lengthened slow and unhurried, the kind of kiss that doesn't aim to prove anything to anyone but the mouths involved. My wedding band touched the slip of her strap and made a small, traitorous chime. "Wait," I said, the word caught mid-swallow between wanting and something like self-respect. "I can't make this the way I find out who I am." Tessa's smile was complicated and kind. "You just did," she said. She pressed her forehead to mine for a beat, and in that press was more honesty than I'd heard in months. "You stopped." We stood there breathing together until our pulses agreed to move back down the scale. In the adjoining room, a chair scraped softly. Lee's laugh came again, lower this time, a sound she used when she wanted to be heard by one person and no one else. I felt both a lurch in my chest and a sudden, surgical clarity. Betrayal is not only the action, it's the rehearsal for it you do in your head while smiling across a dinner table. "Do you want me to go with you?" Tessa asked. "Confrontations look like crime scenes when you walk into them alone." "I don't know what I want," I said, which was true and also an answer. I left the suite with the keycard in my pocket, as if it were a souvenir from a museum exhibit on the porous borders of vows. The hallway air felt colder. Downstairs, the band had switched to something cheerful and transactional. Lee was nowhere on the rooftop when I returned. A donor's wife told me she loved Lee's energy. I told her I did too, as if the words were a past tense not everyone could hear. At home later, Lee's shoes were by the door like obedient animals. She came in an hour after me, hair damp from a quick hotel shower, cheeks pink in a way I could have mistaken for fresh air. She saw me at the table and put down her bag slowly, eyes flicking, calculating. In that tiny, almost invisible pause I saw everything. The preparation, the story she'd edited for plausible details, the little scraps of truth she'd tuck into it like herbs to make it smell right. "How was the rest of the night?" I asked. My voice was light and absolutely level, the voice you use when carrying something heavy and pretending it is. "Exhausting," she said. "We raised more than our stretch goal. The chair wants to do a quarterly salon series, can you imagine?" She studied me, then softened her mouth into the one she used to kiss me goodbye when she felt guilty for leaving early and coming back late. "You okay? You look far away." "I was 2 floors away," I said and slid the keycard across the table. She didn't reach for it. She didn't need to. The shock tightened the corner of her eyes, and then the lie arrived impeccably dressed. "Nate," she began, my name crisp and affectionate all at once, "I booked rooms for the out-of-town board. We needed a place to store the—" "You don't have to make me complicit," I said. The softness in my tone scared me because it meant this wasn't an explosion. It was a decision point, and those are colder. Just decide whether you want us or the version of yourself that requires 2 rooms and a borrowed laugh." Lee's chest rose and fell once, twice. For a heartbeat I thought she might say the one true thing, whatever it was, and let the night do its work. Instead she reached for a smaller truth. "I made a mistake." "No," I said, because the word felt like a rope you throw back over a cliff to show the way up. "A mistake is a wrong turn. This was a route you've been mapping for weeks." We talked, because married people do, even when the talk is a mosaic of admissions and denials and apologies that have been practiced like speeches. The sun started to pale the blinds. The keycard sat between us like a passport to a country I didn't want to visit again. When we finally stopped, it wasn't because we'd reached agreement. It was because an agreement would have been an insult to both of us. I slept on the couch, which is such a cliché it felt like someone else's decision. In the morning, Lee left early, with the careful bustle of a person who wants to be heard leaving without making a sound, and texted me a picture of the donation tracker with a heart emoji. I stared at it until my coffee went cold and the heart blurred. At noon, Tessa sent me a single sentence, "Are you okay?" I wrote back, "I don't know yet." She asked if I wanted to meet for coffee. I did and I didn't. On the sidewalk outside the cafe, she touched my elbow, and in her face I saw no triumph, no guilt, only a steady regard that made me feel like the air had changed pressure. We talked about small things like weather fronts and lapel pins. Then we talked about large things like loneliness inside a shared calendar and how desire can be a mirror that lies without meaning to. When she reached for my hand, I let her, then let go first. "I'm not a consolation prize," she said, not offended, just stating a fact. "I don't want you to be," I said. "I want to figure out who I am when I'm not busy being somebody's good decision." A month later, my apartment still smelled faintly of the lavender Lee preferred in our laundry. I kept the keycard in the drawer with my passports, not because I planned to use it, but because it helped to see something that unlocked the moment my marriage changed shape. We started the kind, difficult process of dividing the life we had built. Lee cried once in the kitchen, tears slipping down the inside of her wrists. I didn't comfort her, and that was the most grown-up thing I have ever done. Sometimes, just before sleep, I hear the soft click of a hotel lock and taste champagne in a room that was pretending to be a home. I remember Tessa's breath brushing my throat and the sound of Lee's private laugh 2 breaths beyond a door. I don't rewrite those moments into morality plays. I hold them up to the light and note what shines and what doesn't. In the city, light learns to make friends with glass. In a marriage, truth learns to disguise itself as kindness. I am learning the difference. On a humid evening in late summer, I went back to the Armitage rooftop bar and ordered a club soda. No gala, no donors, no dress like an apple you wanted to bite just to prove you were alive. The river slid by, pretending not to remember. I slid the keycard from my pocket, traced the room number with my thumb, and then tucked it under the coaster. The bartender cleared it without comment, sweeping it into a bus tray where glass meets glass, and the night forgives nothing and everything with the same sound. When I turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the window again, a man not brave so much as finally awake. Down on the sidewalk, people were walking toward rooms where doors would lock and unlock, where laughter would arrange itself into certain shapes, where someone would choose to be seen. I walked toward my own door, my own choice, the city's hum threaded with a quieter note I could finally hear, the sound of a life that belonged to me.